Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm your host, joined by my blue collar badass, Matt. How's it going, man?
It is going awesome. Happy to be on show number one here. Or wait a minute, are we just back on the mics again after a really long break? Either way, it's good to be here, man, and looking forward to a chat.
Yeah, I know. I do so much video content and sit in this chair all the time now that I have a hard time remembering if it's podcast I'm doing or just other content.
Right, right. Well, we've started doing so many solo episodes that I just sit here usually in the dark because that's what I have to do to figure out my roadcaster now. So I'm just sitting in the dark talking to myself, and it's probably a good thing that there's not video on most of those because I'd look like a lunatic.
I mean, real quick on that piece, dude, there's so much work that has to get done. You're in the literal dark, but in the proverbial dark too. When no one's around, no one's watching, it's the glow of your phone or computer monitor to get stuff done. And that's what people don't see. It's not the glorious side of what we do.
For sure. And I mean, aside from the fact that we don't get paid for this shit, there actually is a lot that goes into it. It's more than just hitting record and running our mouths for half hour, 45 minutes. Especially now that I'm trying to make this a little bit more legitimate here. And, I've got the board and I've got two mics and waiting to do live guests, but I am not a PhD in Roadcaster Pro yet. That is for sure.
You'll have it by the time you're done figuring all this out. That's for sure.
Yeah, by the time that podcasts are no longer cool, there'll be something new.
I don't know. Radio's been around since, it was invented. So I'm
Yeah,
sure
true.
this will be around for a long time to come. Hell, like freaking, well, they kicked him off the air, but Imus was around for however long. And, Stern's been around, since he was probably 12 doing
Yeah,
radio shows.
this is true. I don't feel so bad then. I'll figure it out one of these days.
Uh, all right. Well, without further ado, let's get into our topic of today. And it's taking the time to teach is our topic that we're going to dive into. And to kick this off, I've seen just across both in the companies I've worked for and then with all the guys that I talk to, there's those that really take the time and invest in not only their people, but just people in general, right? Whether it's their friends, whether it's into the associations that they're a part of, whether it's the boards that they sit on, they really invest time into people. And then there's other people that, it's really just the transaction, if you will, right? Hey, I hired you, sit here. Here's your login credentials. Good luck. Right. Like, let me know if you need anything kind of deal. And so those are the two kind of dichotomies that I see. I don't see much in between. It's either like good luck, fed to the wolves, or more hands-on, like very frequent check-in, like how we doing? We're gonna drill stuff. We're gonna teach you, and those are kind of the two opposites that I see. Um, and let's set the stage with that.
So I love this topic. It's very easy for me to get into because of some stuff we're dealing with at my company. And I think you're right. There is this very drastic dichotomy, and I think a lot of it plays into how large or what size of business it is, right? I think with the larger, big corporate style businesses, there's a lot more ability, frankly, to have a better onboarding process and a better education process that lasts throughout a career, where they can have a whole damn department who does nothing but training and upkeep and things like that. And then you get the other side, the whatever they call us, like a micro business, I think is what we qualify as. Maybe not anymore because we're past the 10 threshold now, but a real small business, right? We don't have space or budget for that sort of thing. So I think the two of those kind of are really diametrically opposed. But regardless of how large the business is, it does not relieve ownership or leadership of being able to and being required to really teach and explain things to their people.
And I'd go even so in the design firms that I worked in that were 100 plus people, never did we have a CEO, right? In the three design firms that I worked in that were all over 100 people. Um, Never did we have a CEO stand up and say, like, this is what we stand for. This is why we do what we do. This, here we are. One of them was an ESOP, employee stock ownership program. Um, so everybody, technically it was invested in it. It was more like our monthly meetings were on financials or where projects are or backlog. There was no like, this is where we're going. This is what we do. This is, any of that. Another was even when we did a strategic planning uh, deal, there was still nothing that came out of it to where like, hey, this is where we going. Like, yeah, we put up a poster or something, and I think I actually printed it and put it up, but like, that didn't come from the top. And then in the last firm that I worked with, that was actually bigger and owned by an even bigger international company, there was never any of that put down. And so even and we didn't have a training program. There was none of that onboarding or anything. And it's really, as a department manager, like I was the one who poured into these guys. Even like so like because I was young and I understood the technology, right? Revit, like I was the one to teach all the old guys, right? And I say that I was 25 at the time, and these guys were 50, 55, 60, right? And I taught them all Revit who didn't know it. And from there, but it was like day in and day out of, here's how we do it. Please ask questions. Let's walk through it together. The 3, 4 times to my desk for the same question. And this was our old guy who was like 60. And it's like, he's like, I know this is my third time coming over to you today for the same thing. And I just can't remember. And it's like, dude, that's fine. Because when I teach you this, you're never going to come back to me again for
Right.
this same thing. So like it will save me exponentially in the future for what I invest in you today. And that's really more the thing that I get to. It's a mindset around, do you invest and pour into people or do you not? And it doesn't matter your title or if you have these departments for training. In all the companies I've been in, there was never a department of like trainers. There was no content ever created to train people. There was none of that. Like it was whether the like BIM manager chose to do any of this. And I was the one that started more of these like wisdom Wednesdays or like pass on, information that we all know or like lectures that people give to outside places, but never give that same presentation to the inside of the company, right? On like whatever their specialty is, whether it's design or code updates, or something boring like code updates or a project that we just did or any of those presentations. So I think it goes beyond, it's more of a mindset change that people have to make rather than do you have a department for this? Because then it all weighs on like the department to do stuff versus like everybody being responsible for it.
I love that take on it, and frankly, show's over because Dillon just wrote the master class. But we'll keep going for a few more minutes. But that is the mentality that so many people are lacking, and frankly, I've been through it myself. I've gone through phases where it's like I just don't have time to really stop and teach somebody exactly how I want to do something. But when you look at it as a cost, then that's what it is. But you nailed it. When you look at it as an investment, it takes on a whole different level of importance, right? And you don't make investments with your cash frivolously, right? You plan it out, you invest wisely, and you look for the potential return later. Well, why the fuck don't we do the same thing with our time? And it's future savings, it's future results, it's future efficiencies, it's all these things could come out of it. And to blindly say, we're too busy or we don't have a training department, we don't have videos to show people or whatever is foolish at best. And again, I'm putting the sword into my own back on this one because we do it. And we constantly have this struggle where especially with certain employees of a certain level, and I'm going to keep it innocuous to that end, but there's a certain expectation in our industry, especially, that if you come into our four walls, you should know the basics of what you're supposed to be doing for the most part. Depends on level of seniority, right? But the reality is nobody's ever going to know how the hell to do it the way I want it done. No one. And it doesn't matter if they've got 50 years of experience or 5 or none. It's trying to crack a code where there is no solution to it unless you convince me to sit down and do exactly what you just said. So it's a really easy trap to fall into, but it's something that frankly we all, and I'm just going to steal all of the mentorship from this show for myself, because we all need to do this and we need to be better at it, and take that time and use it as a true investment.
There's a couple nuances too that I want to add to this, but people need to be reminded more than they need to be taught, right? Like more than anything, you need to just remind people what you've taught them. You know, they forget, and that's how it goes, right? It's not just the 60-year-old guy, it's the 20-year-old guy fresh out of school, right? They for sure need to be taught, but they also need to be reminded of the things that you've taught them. So that's one. Two is having been around guys like Chad Wright and spending, considerable time with them, Navy SEAL, deployed, all that, right? Tip of the spear type guys. And Chad instructed for SEAL qualification training for a number of years. But what I found from him is no detail is too small to go over. And if you even listen to like Jocko and those guys, they very much make sure that even the smallest detail is reviewed, right? Like if there's even the speck of grime in a weapon that's checked by the weapons master, you're gonna keep cleaning that thing until it's clean. And so, and even little details, right? Like we were on a hike, the rite of passage mission that I did, where the direction that you put your water bottle back into your backpack for easy access, little things like that, right? So that you can grab the loops without, having to fuddle with it. Little things like that it was no detail too small. And it was always conveyed in a way that was never demeaning. It was always informative. And then the last thing that I want to add is it's not just an investment in your time in the future, right? Like you're going to put in, let's say, 20 minutes today to this person, right? That'll gain you hours in the future over a long enough time horizon, right? Especially if it's a very repetitive thing, right? The 20 minutes, the hour, whatever, to teach the thing that they're going to do repetitively will save you however many hours in the future. So that's one way to look at the investment. The other way is even years later, I'm sure that, and I have, call up the guys that I taught Revit to, that I was the department head for a few years, and I can have lunch with them or drinks or whatever, and it'd be like old times, right? There's no animosity, there's no like bad blood, none of that. And so I also invested care to them. I invested in their skill set, and that in return creates, this will sound cheesy, but like love and affection, right? Like it creates that type of relationship where, they care for the well-being, right? Like little things too. Like one of the guys had a motorcycle wreck. I went to the hospital, and he wanted work. So I brought him stuff to do and drawings to review. But like, and it was at his request. I told him
You're a
no, but
monster.
he was too insistent upon it. Well, he was too bored, he didn't have shit to do.
Sure.
So he was like, I need something. But it's things like that, man. Like those investments in people will pay dividends forever. And you have to, and even if that person leaves or goes somewhere else, the goodwill, the good stories that they'll tell about you, you can't buy that.
Yeah, without a doubt. There's a lot of examples I could give you about former employees of mine, right? And some of them are bad, some of them are good. But to your point, those that you truly put the time into, it doesn't matter where they go. They're loyal, to a degree, no matter where they're at. And I have individuals who've worked for me in the past that just, I've started doing this traction series on some solo shows. Right people, right seat's a big thing, right? And if you get the person who's just in the wrong seat and there isn't a right seat to put them in, they got to go. But in this particular individual's case, I poured a lot into him, and it just wasn't working. He wasn't a good fit. Great guy. He's very successful where he's at now. He still keeps in touch. He sends me Christmas cards, and we chat, a few times a year. So it's a good thing. Now I also have the other side of it too, where, if certain people saw me on the street, they'd probably start shooting. But, that's par for the course too. I think one of the big things, at least that we struggle with in my organization, is the leadership level. We truly forget or don't know how much we know, right? We've been doing this shit for so long that it's truly second nature. I can do it with my eyes closed. I can roll out conceptual estimates in half an hour while I'm talking on the phone, while I'm doing 4 other things, and I just do it. It's just like breathing at this point. But you forget, that learning curve of when you didn't know shit about shit, and you had to try and, you were drinking from a fire hose trying to pick this stuff up. And that's, for me especially, like, it's very hard to kind of remember those days, right? I'm an impatient son of a bitch by nature. And so, you mentioned like the guy coming back 3 times in the same day with the same question. When you were saying that, like, I was cringing. Like, it makes me nuts. But on the same hand, I get it. And we have to learn to be better. We have to take that time and recognize that, these people we're employing, our teammates, especially those that legitimately have not been doing this their entire lives or their entire adult lives, that it's going to take some repetition. It's going to take some time and probably more questions answered than I want to. But again, it all rolls back to that initial investment. And if you just do it and you take the time, you put in the time, the results can be tremendous. If you don't do it and you just are a stodgy asshole and you shut your door and expect people just to do everything that you want them to do in the exact way you want them to do it with no deviations from your standard, you're bound to fail, right? I mean, it's no way to do business.
It goes, I mean, there's like multiple levels to this. One, in having the guy coming back like the 3rd time, and he knew it, right? But we could joke with each other. He's like, man, I know that, like, I'm not getting this, but like, can you show me again? And it's like, I know, Ron, that, that Alzheimer's is kicking in, man. Like, but like having jokes like that, and you build that rapport up with your guys, and it's like, yeah, I'm still going to show you, right? And I get up and walk over and like have him drive and walk through the whole process again. And like, hey, here's how you do it, right? But you're making jokes, you're building rapport, you're making light of the whole thing, right? I know it's going to take me 3 minutes to do. And again, I'm willing to put that investment in, because once he learns, I don't have to do it anymore, right? I don't have to like worry about him working through, or there's not going to be a bottleneck elsewhere in the whole process of it. So it's always how I viewed it, was this investment today is going to reap infinite returns in the future. Like, you don't know how much it will pay, because it's going to be so big and compounded so much over such a long period of time, that taking that little bit of time, and in all honesty, like, our brains expand that amount of time, because for us, like, it's a 2-minute thing, and it really is in most cases. It's 2, 5, 20 minutes, right, to walk through something. And we just, in our mind, because we've done this so much, we think it's like hours. 4 hours. Yeah, like, it's, that 5 minutes feels like 30, as you're painfully, like, it's just like watching somebody drive, through a presentation, and you're like, just click the button, man. It's right there. And it, in all reality, that took 10 seconds,
right.
And you're just like, clawing your eyes out before this guy hits the, mute or unmute button in Zoom, right? Like it's something that stupid, but we we expand this time horizon. In all reality, it's like 20 minutes, at the most for a lot of this. And so one is never long as you think. Two, it'll pay back. And then to your point in remembering what we know and like, oh yeah, like this is not common knowledge, is every time those questions come up, you got to start to make a running list. And in fact, like this is how I'm starting to do more and more content is like, okay, what are all the things that I just inherently know, but people ask a ton of questions on, right? Like what are the quote basics, right? Which for somebody somewhere is an advanced concept, right? It's basic to us because we've been doing this for so long, but for somebody else, it's like wizardry,
It, that's exactly what it is. It's magic, and it goes both ways, right? You gotta. We should be able to expect certain things of our people. You should be able to expect a general level of knowledge of certain things, and you should be able to expect that when you are taking the time to pour into something to teach, that person's actually going to learn, right? They got to be paying attention, and
Yeah.
if somebody comes back to me to ask the same question 3 times, by the third time, I'm asking myself, if not them, like, were you really fucking listening the first time, or is this just going right over your head? And if it's the latter, then it's a problem in presentation on my end, right? When
Yeah.
now we figure out how to reframe it, how to fix it. But it's funny, in the office, like I can be a real bullheaded asshole. Go figure, right? No one would have guessed that. But when I remember this shit is when I'm at home and I'll be talking to Carrie, talking to my wife, and I'll start rattling off, something about the entitlement process. And she just stops me and she's like, what in the fuck are you talking about? Like humans don't speak that language, Matt. Like what does this mean to me in actual English? And it's those times when I'm like, well, shit, I spent the whole day talking like that to my team. Maybe they don't have a clue what I'm saying either. Maybe I'm just a crazy asshole in the corner office that no one gets. So it's just we got to figure out how to phrase things, how to frame conversations based on our audience. And I think it differs for every single person, which makes it infinitely more hard and more difficult to try and figure out this whole leadership game, but you got to be able to figure it out.
It comes down to defining things, and as crazy as that sounds, it's making sure that from the start of the conversation that you define some of these especially key terms, right? Like entitlement process. Okay, well that's a big long process to go through. Okay, like what do we actually mean in this, right? Is it getting a permit? Is it like making sure that everybody's on board? Like what do we actually mean by this thing that we're calling the entitlement process? And so when you start to do definitions and make it second nature, and this is again like I have to be better about this too, is defining the actual terms that we're going to talk about, right? Like AI, machine learning, right? Automation, like what is the actual difference between each of those? And then we can have a place that's common, or at least we're coming from a common understanding to then move forward. And as dumb as it might sound in a meeting to you to define these terms, it's then like everybody can then be on the same page and move forward or ask questions about how we're defining things. And I think that definition piece often gets left out of a conversation in so many areas to where people don't have a common understanding. Because if you and the other person had a common understanding, right? You had the same experiences, the same ways of viewing things. If you looked at the world the same, you would never argue, right? You would have the same understanding. And where most of this comes in is one in the nuance, right? That I mean this thing that's slightly, left or right, you go the other direction. And, now we're worlds apart because we had at the start this slight nuance that became great as we went. And that's where if we can redefine stuff and come back to a common understanding, the world just makes a lot more sense for everybody.
It's a great way to look at it. It's like shooting a rifle, shooting a very high powered long range rifle with no wind, right? You put your crosshairs on the target, you pull the trigger, it goes in a relatively straight line and boom, hits it. But the second you get that wind, and if you're not paying attention, and that wind is your difference in definition and difference in what everyone's focusing on, that little bit of wind, that little confusion in definition can take your bullet 200 yards the wrong direction by the time it hits something. So to really do that is crucial, I think. And I've never looked at it that way. And again, this has become like a therapy session for me.
We'll look at it as a zero, right? You think the rifle's zeroed, but it's not.
Yeah.
And you're shooting a non-zeroed rifle. Like that's a better way to look at it, right? Wind is one thing, but wind isn't something you can control. A zero you can control. But so you're going out there shooting like you think the rifle's zeroed and it's not even close.
You're missing your target completely. And you're sitting there scratching your head and wondering what the hell just happened, because this is good,
right?
shit.
Because you think your data point and your start point, right? It's always like the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? But you got to know where you are and you got to know where you want to go. But if you have no control point, right? No, it's not zeroed. You know where you want to go, but if you don't know where you are, right? That's a definition. That's a zero on a rifle. That's a GPS coordinate, like all those things, right? Where you are today, what your financial position is, what your cash flow projection looks like, right? We can define a lot of these things in business. We know where we want to go. Like goals are easy to define, but it's where are we actually at today and what do we need to do to get there, right? What's the traverse now through that distance? So the more that we can define very narrowly and very specifically where we are today, makes it a lot easier to travel in a straight line to that other path. And I mean, dude, we're all guilty of it in some way, shape, or form in some area of our lives. Like much like you, talk to my wife about stuff, and she either is, deer in the headlights, or, like I have to re-explain things, and doesn't always go well. But.
Well, and it goes both ways too. I mean, we both just have fallen on the sword a lot, and I'll still continue to do that. There's a lot of errors in the way that I've quote unquote taught things, but you also got to have a willing and receptive audience that's actively listening and actively trying to learn, and ask the right questions, ask them when the time is appropriate. There's a lot of things that we do that are mission critical, right? Numbers based things that if they're wrong, I mean, it could be disastrous. So I would much rather have somebody come and ask me the same question 3 times than put out product, whatever that may be, whether it's an estimate or an invoice or a budget update, whatever, that's wrong, because that could kill us. So you gotta have both sides. The people in the learning seat have to be willing and empowered to actually learn. And if that means they need to ask lots of questions, then they need to ask lots of questions. They can't sit there like a bump on a log and get quiet and then go in their office and try and remember all the shit I just rattled off and then just try and fake it, right? So that it's got to go both ways. But I think more of it probably lands on the leadership side. On the side of the teacher is 90% of it.
Right. And again, if you're starting out and trying to teach people stuff, like as much shit I think as society gives teachers, like there is a very big art to teaching.
Oh, yeah.
Like there is, there's a lot of skill in being able to convey a topic, a lesson, whatever to somebody. Like it's a big deal. And far too often we make assumptions around like what we think people know. And that's like another piece that falls again on the teacher, is like, okay, I'm assuming that you know X, Y, and Z, but if something is missing in there, the rest of it, again, it goes back to definitions. What do we know? Like trying to judge their abilities, their skills, their knowledge base, and then to move forward and build off of that. And again, and this also goes into like a humility thing from both the teacher and the student is, and again, in construction, like big tough man, right? Like I know my stuff, not humble enough to be like, dude, I don't understand a thing that you just said, right? Like, and then they go away, they like beat their head because they didn't understand what was conveyed, and they weren't willing to ask the question. So there's that, and then I mean, this goes a lot deeper too. There's one, I'll leave it at this. It's called the teachability index, right? Your willingness to learn and willingness to change. Both of those have to be very high for you to then be able to absorb that knowledge and information. And a lot of people become like a sponge, right? Like it's their sponge is full, like you can't learn anymore. So chunking a lot of this stuff down into very bite-sized pieces, again, whether that's 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 45 minutes, but into very bite-sized pieces so that they can digest it and then come back with more questions, go implement a little thing, come back, implement a little thing, come back. Uh, there's a lot of that too. So I mean, this whole teaching thing and educating people, it goes, it's such a deep conversation around like it's not just, it starts with everything that we began this podcast with. Are you willing to invest? And is your mindset around investing in people? If it's not, that's the first thing to change.
Yeah, I got nothing else to add. I mean, it's an investment in your people, and that's the only way you succeed. It's the only way you grow your investment, which is your company. You know, there's a million different analogies we could throw at this, but it all comes down to being willing to make that commitment, make that investment, and then sticking to it. But again, it goes both ways. So everybody's got to be wanting to move in the same direction. And if you're not, then again, you're not necessarily going to wind up homeless with no friends, but maybe it's the wrong spot for one or the other.
And I found too, like, because even in leading a group of guys that was double my age at the time, because I was so voracious in my learning and just teachability from these guys, right? Like I took everything in, I absorbed all of it. That they were more willing to ask questions, that they didn't see it as a sign of weakness because I asked questions, right? So I went first, and then a lot of the guys, again, some were more receptive than others, but it became a thing that it was okay to ask a question, that I wasn't going to be pissed. I might have, did a little ribbing back and forth, but that's just part of, culture, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just part of it. So like, and I, got it back, right? Like I sat on a ball for, year, like one of those big athletic balls. So like people gave me shit about that all the time too, because it helped my posture. But like, again, like I was willing to be ribbed. They were, everybody played along. And at the end of the day, we got everything done. So go first too, as a leader, be willing to, check the ego a little bit, ask questions, be afraid to look stupid, but no one ever really thinks a guy asking questions is a dumbass.
No, no, I'd rather have them ask the question, and the ribbing and the culture thing, that especially on the construction side, especially with me. I mean, I came out of the field, right? My knuckles are blown out to unrecognizable proportions from getting hit with hammers. I have that, rough and gruff mentality. While I now, I don't wear my tool bags often at all, but there's still that pocket in the back of my head where, I might tell you to fuck off, but then I'm going to laugh and say, I just kidding, sit down. Let's figure this out. And everybody's got to be able to figure out those nuances too.
Again, this is just, it's deep, and you've got to be just in trying to absorb this concept and this topic of teaching. You've got to be voracious in your knowledge consumption. You've got to really think through what it is that you're learning, and then try to find ways to convey that back in bite-sized pieces to your people, right? They're not going to have the breadth and width of knowledge that you have and the years of experience. And so the more you can chunk that down into slivers, the better off you're going to be, in the whole. But again, this all comes down to what's your intention, what's your mindset going into it. And you set that, a lot of things kind of fall into place.
That's the way it works, man.
All right, guys, that's going to be this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Any last words, Matt?
Guys, I would just say keep shooting the DMs my way, our way. I'm enjoying the connection a little bit on a different level with all of you that are doing it. We are taking your requests and things like that to heart. We'll be doing, obviously a handful of solo shows, a handful of dual shows. We've got some great interview shows coming up still. So keep that communication line open. Like the show, share the show, all that shit. Check out our YouTube site. It's also growing.
All right, guys, you heard the man. Share the show, and until next time.